So hi everybody, this is a review video for the first graders about the Black Death pandemic, and this section talks about Europe encountering the Black Death. So in 1347, the plague spread via land exchange route to Eastern Europe and via sea trading route to Mediterranean kingdoms, then swept north, ravaging every town it encountered. So this plague, they spread via land and spread via sea. So through land it traveled to Eastern Europe, and through sea it traveled along with the Mediterranean kingdoms, and it ravaged every town it encountered. So it destroyed. It destroyed every town the plague encountering, and the traders fleeing plague-ridden Kaffa unintentionally brought the disease to Constantinople, large coastal trading city located between Asia and Europe, after which it spread rapidly to Europe. So these European traders fleeing from the Kaffa area, they unintentionally brought this plague to Constantinople, which is between Asia and Europe, and from Constantinople, the plague spread rapidly to Europe. Okay? And in late 1347, following the infection of Constantinople, Sicily and Greece encountered plague through exchange with the infected traders. So from Constantinople, it moved to Sicily and Greece. So Constantinople to Sicily and Greece, and from Sicily and Greece, it's all over the Europe. So from this primary starting point, the plague spread north and west, reaching as far as Scandinavia by 1351. So the plague reached north and west of Europe, and it reached Scandinavia in 1351. And by 1353, all of the Eurasian landmass and much of North Africa had encountered plague, and approximately a third of Europeans had perished. So a third of European population disappeared. Right? So let me just briefly show you the map here. Okay. So you have Kaffa here, the old town Kaffa, and nowadays it's a Crimean area. So the European traders, they were fleeing the Kaffa area, and they unintentionally brought this plague to Constantinople, nowadays modern-day Turkey, right? Constantinople, and from Constantinople, the plague moved to Sicily, Italian island, and it also moved to Greece. So plague moved to these countries, and from here it traveled west, and the plague traveled north all the way up to the Scandinavian peninsula, where Sweden, Finland, and Denmark is located. So entire Eurasian landmass infected by the plague. The Black Death pandemic devastated Europe and impacted many aspects of European society. So it just destroyed European society. And with upward of 20 million dead, life was at standstill, and there were not enough living to bury the dead. So here, upward of 20 million. So upward, so this is a maximum, right? Maximum and up to 20 million people died in Europe, and the life was a standstill. The life was frozen. And so many people died, there were not enough living people to bury the dead body. And trade declined and social order collapsed, so that many people feared leaving home. So this trade itself declined, and the social order, such as justice system or the law enforcement, collapsed in a society. Many people just were afraid of going out. They just stayed home. So those who left fled to countryside, causing a brief deurbanization. So some of the people who stayed in the city, they fled to the countryside, expecting that the country would be a little bit better than the city. So these massive movement from the city to countryside caused a brief de-urbanization. The city was becoming more empty because people were fleeing to countryside, and countryside conditions, unfortunately, were no better than cities. So, unfortunately, though, the countryside was as bad as cities. As bad as the city conditions, the entire village had been wiped out by the plague. The entire villages just disappeared, wiped out by the plague. Disappeared. And here are some consequences of the devastating exchanges. In the decade following the pandemic, Europe experienced significant economic, social, scientific, and religious changes. So after the pandemic, Europe went through various changes in various perspectives of society, such as like economic and social, scientific, and religious changes. So the first economic change was shifting the value of land and goods. So the value of land and goods changed after the pandemic. Many workers died, creating difficulties for landowners to produce goods. So many workers died, so it was really difficult for the landowners to produce any kind of goods because there were no workers out there. And obtaining goods through trade also proved to be difficult because exchange decreased in fear of encountering the disease. Also, the trade also, getting a good through trade became quite difficult because people just didn't go out. People were afraid of getting infected by disease when they go outside. So just trade itself just decreased. So it was really difficult to get a hold of any kind of product. So this both caused inflation in prices for goods. So the many workers die, so cannot produce any product, and trade itself decreased. So these both of the factor caused an inflation in price of goods. So the price just went up, soared in the sky, and conversely, land values declined. There are not many workers who are able to work on the land, so the value of land just decreased, deflated. In the century leading up to the pandemic, the cost for land rose consistently. So this pandemic, Black Death pandemic situation, it occurred around this 1346 and 1353. So around this time, the price of real estate just goes up. It went up when it rose consistently. But later, after many landowners died, land was abundant and prices dropped drastically. So many people died after the pandemic. Even the landowners died. So this land became abundant. So the price dropped drastically. So drastically means significantly. And these lower prices allowed more people to purchase land, and that was previously unaffordable. Before the pandemic, the land price, real estate price was really expensive, so only few landowners could afford buying the land. But after the pandemic, the price of land just dropped drastically, so more people could afford the land. So the consequence of the pandemic inspired Peasant exploration of revolutionary ideas and the creation of poor laws. So, before the pandemic, the farmers and peasants, they were not interested in revolutionary ideas. They were just too busy working, too busy supporting their family. And so they didn't have time to think about revolution. They didn't have time to think about changing the society, not interested in the law, which is protecting the right of the poor people, of the right of the farmers. But after pandemic, the situation just changed. So these farmers become interested in the revolutionary ideas and poor law, and the peasant had died in great number, as illustrated by Giovanni Boccaccio in his Decameron. So this famous Italian writer, Giovanni Boccaccio, he composed this book called Decameron about these people's experience during this pandemic period, and the story goes, the plight of the lower and most of the middle classes was even more pitiful to behold. So the plight here Plight is hardship, right? Hardship and difficulties. And pitiful is like painful. And behold is watch. So this hardship and difficulty for lower and middle class people even more painful to watch. Because most of them just remained in their houses either through poverty or in hopes of safety and fell sick by thousands. Now these many lower and middle class people just stayed at home because of two reasons. One is through poverty. You need money. You need money to go outside, but they were just too poor to go out, so they just stay home. And also, in the hope of safety, they believe that it is safer to stay at home. If you go out, they were afraid to get infected by the disease. So they just stayed at home, and they were running out of food, running out of medicine, running out of the clothing, running out of everything. So naturally, you become weak and you fell sick by thousands. Thousands of lower class, middle class people fell sick. And since they received no care and attention, almost all of them died. There were not enough nurses or doctors to go around each individual household and take care of those sick people. It's almost impossible. So, these people just fell sick at home and just thousands of them just died, unfortunately. So the labor supply plummeted, right? So here, plummet, decreased significantly. And peasants realized they could demand higher wages. So more and more farmers, they realized that now the situation changed. So they could they could ask for a higher salaries, higher wages. Not many workers to be able to work anyway. So, they just refuse to work until they get paid really high wages. So in England, King Edward III sought to quell this demand by issuing the Statute of Labor, a draconian decree requiring every able-bodied unemployed person under 60 to work for anyone who wanted to hire him. So in England, for instance, King Edward III, he sought to quell this demand. So he sought to solve this problem of lack of labor forces. So he issued a state of labor, which is a draconian decree. So here, draconian is really severe or really harsh. Really harsh decree is an order by law. So the King Edward III issued a severe order requiring every able-bodied unemployed person under 60. If you are under 60 years of age and you are not employed at the moment, you have to work for anyone who is willing to hire you. Violator of the Statute of Labor will fined. If you violate this law, you will be fined. You have to pay money for the government. However, this did not stop the peasant demand, as described by Henry Knighton. However, these peasant farmers didn't care about this statute of labor. They didn't care about the law made by the king. And Henry Knighton, he left a journal record of his experience during this time, and it says, the workers, nevertheless, were so elated and contrary that they did not heed the mandate of the king prohibiting higher wages, but if anyone wanted to hire them, he had to give them as desired. So, this time just farmers, so elated. They were just so excited. Farmers so excited for the fact that they can demand higher salaries, really higher wages. So they were so excited and they didn't care. They didn't heed. They didn't pay attention to. So the farmers just didn't pay attention to the law issued by the king. So if anyone wants to hire them, he had to give them as desired. So if any landlord wants to hire the farmers, the landlord have to pay whatever the farmers desired. So the landlord had only two options. So either lose their crops and food or grant the selfish and lofty wishes of the workers. So, if you have a seed and you put it just in a storage room and you don't work, you don't cultivate the seed, it eventually will rotten and the seed will die out. So you either lose your crops or food by not paying the expensive money for the farmer, or you grant them, you pay them. You pay or you give the money to these farmers, selfish and lofty wishes and expensive price. You pay money and you have workers cultivate your crops and fruits. So you only have two options. So peasant uprising continued during the 14th century throughout Europe, as exemplified by the Jacquerie in France in 1358 and Ciompi revolt in 1378 in Italy and Wat Tyler rebellion in England. So this peasant rebellion, so the peasant revolution uprising, peasant uprising continued during 14th century in various European countries, such as like in France, 1358, the Jacquerie movement occurred, and in Italy, 1378, the Ciompi revolt occurred, and in England, Wat Tyler rebellion occurred in 1381. So the peasant rebellion started as small whispers of discontent, gaining scope quickly, leading to increased wages and expanded rights. So, this peasant rebellions, peasant revolution, it didn't start out big from the beginning. I mean, at first, it was just a small whisper of discontent. Okay? So, the small whisper of discontent, small whisper of dissatisfaction, but it quickly gained scope. It quickly gained support. Quickly gained support from the other farmers and leading to increased wages and expanded rights. So, increased wages empowered peasant, causing serfdom to disappear in many places, triggering the decline of manorialism. So, these peasants, since they paid more money now, they become powerful. Peasants become powerful compared to before the pandemic period, so causing serfdom to disappear in many places. So the serfdom here is, the serfdom is the feudal system, right? This feudal system starts to disappear and triggering begin the decline of manorialism. So the manorialism here, manorialism is quite similar concept with the feudal system or the serfdom, right? So the serfdom, feudal system, manorialism start to disappear from European society after peasants become powerful. So the demand for labor was so high, it threatened manorial holdings. So, just these feudal system in many castles, feudal, they didn't have enough farmers, enough workers. Way too small farmers and workers. So it was almost impossible to maintain manorial system in European society. So the serfs, no longer tied to one landlord, could easily leave for another who would hire them. So the serfs, before the pandemic, serfs only worked for one landlord. But now, after pandemic, serfs could easily move around. They could easily move around and find different places, so they easily leave for another, and the lord had to make accommodation in order to keep peasants on their land. So the landlord, they not only have to pay the peasant, but also they have to provide housings for the farmers to keep them on their land. However, many serfs explored new labor options and ultimately became vagrant migratory workers. So the serfs, they decided to try something new, and they become vagrant migratory. So the vagrant migratory is quite similar meaning. Okay? Quite similar meaning. It means moving around. So the farmers move around in different places, and the lacking an assured labor supply, many previously self-sufficient manor collapsed and increasing the need for merchant and causing the reurbanization as cities could provide for their inhabitants without requiring the serfs. So, it was difficult to get hold of a stable labor supply. So before pandemic, the manor were self-sufficient. It could run itself on its own. It could produce a lot of stuff on its own. Now the workers are gone, so the manor started to collapse, and it increased the need for merchants. They need more of a merchant system using money, buying and selling the items. And also it caused reurbanization, as city could provide for the inhabitants without requiring serfdom. So since the city could provide better life for people without the help of the serfdom, European people started to build more and more cities in Europe. Okay? So this is how far we covered last time. So again, you guys did a good job participating, and we'll continue our lesson in next video. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.